Hi everyone, welcome to Immigration TalkShow. I'm Rajni Bharara, your host, and $100,000 for H-1B. And this news is already been going on since a week, and the social media is still blowing up with this news. People still want to know what is going on, what is happening, what is not happening, who's actually supposed to pay the fee, and who's not supposed to pay the fee. The H-1B frenzy is, like I said, blowing up all over social media. So, to tackle all these questions and what's really been going on, we are live on a Sunday with your and our favorite attorney, Jonathan Wasden, to tackle all your questions. So, if you have any question related to this topic, make sure to post them in the comment section. And I would also like to read out this very important disclaimer before I move ahead. By watching our videos, you agree and understand that the information provided by our attorneys and by our attorneys is not legal advice. Use of information is at your own risk. So, yes, do follow this disclaimer. As, like I said, use of information is at your own risk. So, be very careful. But if you have any questions, you can, of course, put them and share them in the comment section. We'll be more than happy to take them. I'm hoping you are enjoying your Sunday, and we are going to make your Sunday even more exciting by this very important session. So yes, keep your comments coming, keep your questions coming. But for now, let me take my very important question and very first question to John. John, before I take my question, welcome back to the show. Firstly,
Oh, thank you.
okay. So I know it's a Sunday, and we have bothered you on a Sunday. So firstly, sorry for that, and I hope we are not like bothering you, and we are not making it stressful for you, because I know you are, or every time you're busy with your cases and you only get Sunday to actually enjoy and relax. But still, on a Sunday, you're giving time to us. So thank you so much for that.
No trouble. I don't know too many immigration attorneys these days that actually get a Sunday off or any day off these days. It's definitely been a wild ride.
That's true. I think, I mean, 2025 has been a wild ride, like you said, but I think the coming 4 years are going to be even more. What do you have to say about
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, we'll see if we have elections at the midterms and how those midterm elections take shape. That'll kind of dictate how the rest of the 4 years will go.
Yeah, that's true. Absolutely. And but let's come to our topic and talk about 100K H-1B fee and what nobody's telling Indians. And we will talk about Indians, of course, but we will also talk about everybody. So I would like to understand, and I would like to ask you that what do you make of this news when this news was announced? The administration, some of them were saying that it is going to start from the next year, but then the press secretary said it's going to start from 2026, the next year, but then the administration said that it has already been implemented. It is going to implement from the 21st of September. So it looked like as if there was a lot of, I mean, the administration itself was, a little confused about this. So what do you have to say about this news, firstly?
So looking at this whole experience, this has been, a master class in
Mhm.
how not to display a new policy. Everything about this thing from start to finish has been a complete jumble, disorganization, and really not even articulating the legal points with any type of clarity. I don't know if that was by their intent, because the only thing that makes sense to me is either they're rankly incompetent or they're intentionally trying to create chaos. There's really no middle explanation here. From what I've seen of the Trump administration so far, I'm inclined to go with the rankly incompetent, but we'll see how it plays out. But from the get go, this policy was released, no warning, no heads up, and on its terms, on the face of this proclamation, it was seemed to be very clear to all immigration attorneys that this was a border entry fee. It was going to be, assessed to H-1Bs coming in on, previously unstamped visas, new visas, and that it was going to apply universally. Then, you know, everybody was up in arms about it, and the press secretary came out with that indignant remark saying, "Oh, these immigration attorneys are crazy. They don't know what they're talking about." And then you have a flurry of contradictory and new policy interpretations come out. What we've seen from the latest of all of these is that it's going to apply to not only cap new H-1Bs coming into the US, but any new visa. So if you go home for stamping, then you're going to be subject to that fee on the return after getting stamped, even if it's a
Yeah.
extension or it's not your first H-1B. So any newly issued visa from the consulate is going to be subject to this fee when they hit the border, the port of entry.
Right. So, John, do you think that implementing this 100K dollar fee is a quiet way of cutting down immigration without saying so?
Yeah, I think that's definitely part of it. There's two different things going on. One is the Trump/Miller uh, regime is trying to eliminate as many foreign workers as possible.
Mhm.
The other thing that's going on is they're trying to, you know, secure the support of the major tech companies by making it so that they're really the only ones who are going to be able to afford H-1Bs. And they're doing that in two ways. They're doing that with this $100,000 fee, and they're
Mhm.
also doing it with, the changing of the prevailing wage rates, which is coming from the Department of Labor. All of that is going to be designed to price out small, medium companies from participating in the H-1B program and really making the H-1B accessible only to the FANG companies.
Right, right. Okay, I still have a lot of questions that I would like to ask, but I see a lot of people, posting. I know it's a Sunday, but still people are here watching this show because they want to, get answers from you, and they have already started posting their questions. So let me quickly say hi to all of them. I see Shrey here, Shrey Garg is here, and then Ricky is here. Zahan is also here. So hi to all of you, and I am seeing your questions pop up in the chats. I'm definitely going to take them in a bit. But before I take your question, please keep your patience. Please keep the patience a bit. And let me ask this very important question because I know that this is something that you also want to know about. So, John, before any of them ask, I would like to ask you this. So, who is actually supposed to pay this fee, the employer or the employee? Because I'm sure, a lot of people are confused about this question too.
So realistically, it's going to have to be the employer because nobody's going to be paying $100,000 for the privilege of working for a job that maybe pays 150, maybe $200,000. So it's going to have to be the employer,
Mm.
and it's going to be, you know, who pays the fee is also an interesting question because it's allegedly supposed to be a border entry fee, which
Right.
when you're applying for admission to the U.S. at the border, the applicant is the individual, not the company. And so it's this really poorly thought out process that doesn't really fit in squarely with any of the known immigration laws and practices that the country's had thus far.
Right, right. Okay, so the employer is supposed to pay the fee. And okay, so let me quickly take Ricky's question. So Ricky has also posted about this fee. So Ricky says, hello, thanks for the session. Will 100K have to be paid for case of concurrent H-1B by a second employer after 21st September? What is considered as a new petition under this executive order?
So a new petition is just that. So it doesn't apply to extensions of status or change of employers. It's going to apply to is when you get a newly approved petition and then leave the country and try and re-enter. That's when you're going to have to pay the fee. So it looks like from the flurry of policy corrections and policy interpretations that have come out that you'll pay this once per 3-year visa.
Okay, okay. He's also saying, I'm in the US, plan to travel to my home country for stamping. Will those with approved H-1B have to pay 100K dollar after first time visa stamping in their home country upon entry into the US?
That's correct. That's the way that it's being interpreted, and that's how it looks on its face. Is that if it's a new H-1B visa where you're going for a stamp at the consulate, that newly stamped visa will be subject to the fee.
Right. And he also says, should existing H-1B workers consider moving to O-1? What is the way of self-petition O-1A if the employer isn't willing to file one? What will you need in such a case to help with the filing?
So, if you're talking about an O1, obviously that's not part of the proclamation. O1s, just by their very nature, are tough to get to. You have to meet a lot of criteria, and what specific criteria are applicable to you really depends on the specifics of your case. So I'd say if you want to talk about O1s, best to schedule an appointment with somebody that practices in immigration law that knows O1s and discuss with them, how you are best able to proceed forward. And if you're really competitive or eligible for the O1.
Okay. Ricky, I hope you have got your answer. Thank you so much for your question. If you have more follow-ups, please continue posting them in the comments. SK is also here. Hi, SK. I've seen your hi. If you have any question, please, you also post them in the comment section. Meanwhile, let me take Shrey's question. Shrey says, I heard interview of Commerce Secretary Lutnick, and he also says Lutnick in an interview said that new rules will come into force in February 2026. Is it true?
So there's going to be new H-1B rules. There's the new rules challenge or changing the way the lottery is done, as well as the Department of Labor is going to be issuing new rules as well on prevailing wage. Project Firewall is also something that's come out more from the Department of Labor side. It's workplace enforcement activity. So there is a stream of new processes and regulations that are coming out, all impacting the H-1B program.
Right. Okay. And okay, let me also take Zahan's question. Zahan says, are these all new rules going to impact H-1B extension petition slash process as I don't have my H-1B visa stamped?
So if you're in the US, it won't apply. It will only apply when you leave the US, get a new visa stamp, and try to re-enter the US. That's when you're going to have to pay the $100,000 fee. So the oddity of this $100,000 fee is that it's not clear quite yet who you're paying that fee to. And now, if it's a border admission fee, which is what the proclamation describes it as, that would mean you pay CBP. However, USCIS has announced that they're creating a process that will be released within 30 days or so for you to pay the fee to them, which doesn't really make sense if it's a border admission fee. The other issue is, USCIS has limits on how they can charge fees to cover the cost of their adjudications. This $100,000 fee, there's nothing in the world about this process that is worth $100,000 of government time. So it will be hard for them to justify this fee, when they're sued on it.
Okay. John, could we also see or could we also hear the news of a lot of layoffs happening because of, this news?
I don't know if the layoffs are, necessarily attributable to this new proclamation, but tech layoffs happen, cyclically. So I wouldn't be surprised, if there are a lot of layoffs going on. I think the policy is really too new to be driving any type of layoff movement, and also it's too uncertain. We don't know. We didn't know for the first week of this thing's existence how it was going to play out and who was going to be impacting.
Right, right. But what do you think the future is exactly going to be? Do you think that this will, I mean, the administration might think about, because I also asked this question in one of my other shows with other attorneys too, that the administration itself is a combination of immigrants. I mean, there are a lot of people from different not countries, but I'd say immigrants. Basically, if we talk about Vivek Ramaswamy, Elon Musk, or Kash Patel, and so many of them, and President Trump's wife, they are immigrants. So could they think about it and maybe think about taking this decision back?
And so the only way that this decision's getting walked back completely is in the courts. The Stephen Miller is driving immigration policy. He's the one that controls it. There's a lot of tension when Musk was doing Doge between he and Stephen Miller on immigration issues, and Stephen Miller won all those battles. So I really don't see them walking this back. Um, it's going to have to be something that's fought out in court, and the courts are going to have to determine whether or not the president can actually do this.
Okay. And are US company already backing away from hiring Indians because of this proposed fee?
We haven't really seen that. Like I said, it's really too new to tell.
Mhm.
I think anybody bringing in a new H-1B from overseas is probably going to tell them to not travel and to hold off until this is resolved. And, because they don't want to pay the $100,000 fee. The major tech companies that have, $1 trillion in market capitalization probably aren't going to be deterred, from hiring people that they need or that they see are necessary. So I don't think that's going to really slow them down. But I think your small to medium companies, which are really the economic drivers of the country, are going to be the ones that hold off on hiring, if the fee is going to be required for that individual.
But who do you think is going to be majorly impacted with this?
Say it again, sorry.
I wanted to ask that who do you think is going to be majorly impacted with this?
In terms of the workers, it's going to be the people that have left the country or outside of the country coming in on new visas that have not been stamped yet. So in terms of the companies, the ones that'll be the most impacted are the small and medium-sized companies. They're the ones that just can't afford to be dropping $200,000 or $100,000 for, an employee every 3 years.
Right, right. Okay. So let me take SK's question. SK says, hi, for those selected in 2025 lottery and outside US, petition is filed before September 21st and it's not yet approved for consular processing petitions. Do we need to pay $100 fee? I think he means to say $100,000 fee in this case?
According to the plain language of the proclamation, it's not clear if it's the petition or the visa application. The later interpretations use the word petition. So if the word petition is what actually is legally controlling, then no. If your petition was filed before the 21st of September, the fee is off the table. If it's the visa application, then yes. And that distinction is very important. Those words matter, but they are very sloppy in all of their policy interpretations, as well as in the proclamation itself, on which one they're actually meaning. And so that's creating a little bit of additional confusion.
Right, right. Okay, so SK, if you have any more questions, please continue posting them in the follow-ups. Continue posting them in the comment section. And I see a lot of other questions posted by the viewers. So, okay, let me give priority to them rather than my question. So let me take Seema's for now. Seema says, what happens if my employer says they can't afford this fee? Do I immediately fall out of status or do I have some kind of grace period to switch jobs?
So if you're in the US and you haven't left the US, you don't have to pay the fee. So if losing status would infer that you're in the US in status. So this is not something that you or your employer have to worry about. It's only going to matter when you leave the country and have to get a new visa stamp.
Right. Okay. Seema, again, I hope you have also got your answer. Thank you so much for your question. And I hope you all are enjoying the show like I am. So if you are, make sure to like this video, share this video who you think can benefit from all this information that John is sharing. And also don't forget to subscribe to Immigration Talk Show. And I think Ricky has more questions coming. And let me take his question. He says, I heard that some H-1B workers have entered the US after 21st September without paying the $100 K fee. So should one get the first time H-1B stamping now before they have the process to collect the fee in place?
That would probably be, worth the gamble, I would say. The only thing that you have to worry about is if you go to the port of entry and you apply for admission to entry into the US, If they determine that you don't have the correct documents and documentation for entry, it's possible that they could do an expedited removal. And the expedited removal would mean that you have a 5-year bar to reentry into the US. Yeah, they could allow you to withdraw your application for admission, in which there's no penalty, but that's not a guarantee. So, on one hand, it would be clever to try and get into the country, kind of under the radar, so to speak. But you're running a risk if you do that, because you could end up with a 5-year bar to reentry. So I would say your best bet, what I would think is the safest bet, is to wait and see how this plays out in the courts. And then, once it's ultimately shot down by the courts, then go and get admission to the US.
Okay. And he also goes on to say, how will the new proposed H-1B wage level impact existing H-1B workers? Or is it mainly for lottery selections? Is there any risk to existing H-1B workers who are on wage one level?
So, two different issues. One is the way that the lottery is going to change. So, the lottery rules will change to give priority to the highest paid or highest compensated H-1Bs. So that's only going to affect the lottery, the new people going into the lottery. The other issue that's coming into the future is the Department of Labor is right now working on proposed rules to change the way prevailing wage is calculated. Once that becomes final, that will apply to everybody needing a prevailing wage determination. And that'll be new and existing H-1Bs. So those are two separate things. The lottery only is going to apply to the new H-1Bs, and the prevailing wage, when it comes out and it hasn't been released yet, will apply across the board.
Okay. Okay. So, Ricky, I hope you have got your answers. Let me also take Shreyas' question because he posted another one, and he also asks that if someone is in USA on J visa and want to move to H-1B by change of status, will 100K be applied in that?
Again, according to the interpretations in the proclamation, it only applies when you're outside of the US coming in. If you're changing status, it does not apply.
Okay. All right. So, John, also, we've gathered some questions from social media, I think mostly from Reddit, because that's where, people post a lot of questions. So, one of the viewer has posted that if I'm an F1 student graduating in May, does the 100K fee affect my OPT or STEM OPT pathway? What do you have to say?
It has nothing to do with OPT or STEM OPT. It only has to do with H-1B visa holders, people who have been approved for an H-1B petition, who are outside of the US on a newly stamped H-1B coming into the US.
Right. Okay. And do you think will universities in the US lose, Indian students because companies won't sponsor them anymore?
I mean, it's very possible. It's I would say that they're going to lose a lot of Indian students for a variety of reasons, all caused by the Trump administration. So, the environment for international students has frankly never been worse. So, it'll be interesting to see what next fall's numbers are like for admissions and for enrollments for international students, and how big of a hole that will cause in the college's budgets, because they'll be losing out on a lot of tuition, as well as the impact that it'll have on major universities' research and development programs when they don't have those highly educated people going to their master's and PhD programs.
Okay, okay. And do you think does a new fee make it pointless to plan a US career right after graduation?
So there's a lot that's in flux right now with this fee. I strongly suspect this fee is not going to withstand judicial scrutiny, meaning I think it's going to get invalidated by the courts. So, if we've learned anything from the Trump administration, is they like to make a big splash. They don't really care whether or not it's legal or not, as long as it pacifies their base and makes their base, cheer and get up in arms. So we saw with the birthright
Right.
citizenship thing. I don't know of a serious lawyer out there who thinks that the government has a chance in Hades of winning in the birthright citizenship case. But the Trump administration doesn't care. They're just doing it because it makes their base happy. And I think that's, especially in the immigration context, there's a whole lot of things they know what they're doing are illegal. And when the courts get a hold of it, will block them eventually. But it makes for great headlines. It gets their base excited. And so they do it just for political purposes. I see this $100,000 fee kind of fitting in that category of things they know aren't going to last, but make a big splash and get headlines for them and avoid the Epstein files.
Okay. So I think let me quickly take Karthik's question also. Karthik is saying that for companies hiring global talent, this fee adds a significant cost layer. Are we likely to see a shift toward remote hiring, L1 transfers, or even offshoring as a workaround? What do you have to say?
Yeah, I mean, exactly. So right now, the vast majority of, especially in the IT realm, can be done remotely. And if you do that job remotely, the US loses out on income tax revenues, social security tax revenues. They also lose out on things like, you know, you're buying a car, you're paying sales tax on the car. The dealership is, selling the car to you and making money. And so there's a whole lot of economic churn that foreign workers bring that we'll be losing out on. And that will be going to other countries or staying in their home country. So it's really a self-inflicted gunshot wound here to the economy and the tech industry in general. And it makes no logical sense unless you look at it from this perspective. Miller wants to eliminate brown people from the US. If he's a white nationalist, which by all accounts he is, this is more important to him than the economy of the country and whether or not, Americans are economically hurt because he wants to make America white again.
Okay, not great, but white.
Yeah.
Okay. So he also goes on to say that does this rule unintentionally incentivize bypassing the H-1B system altogether?
So, the H-1B system right now, as it currently stands, it has its flaws. And I think if anything, a lot of these maneuvers by the Trump administration highlight the need for not only reform of the H-1B program, but comprehensive immigration reform. So ideally, when we get a new Congress, we'll be able to have some people that can actually get some legislation through and can force the president to compromise on some things. But everything in immigration right now is a mess because all of the flaws in the system are being completely and utterly exploited by the Trump administration and making life miserable for everybody.
John, a little digressing from the topic, but not exactly digressing, but it's somewhat related to it also. I have been seeing a lot of protests happening all across Europe, immigration protests, and they are asking people to go back to their home countries. So do you think, I've seen that in Australia and somewhat in Canada and of course in the US, Italy too. So do you think all this is happening, all whatever that is happening, these immigration protests is somewhat politically motivated, or are people really unhappy that immigrants are coming to their countries and making living in their countries?
Europe is a different case entirely because Europe's problem with immigration has to do with really the lack of assimilation. They when they started opening up the doors for immigration for foreign workers, it was with the idea that it would happen like it does here in the US, that people would integrate into society and be people from all different types of racial backgrounds and cultural backgrounds, but they would all be essentially culturally German or French or something. And that really hasn't happened so much in those countries, which is different than here in the US because, once you're second generation immigrant in this country, you're for all intents and purposes American. You know, you're hanging out with, kids who are, however many generations back American, you're playing American sports, watching American television, hanging out and talking like every other kid of your age from the country. So America doesn't have the assimilation problem. So I think it's a little bit different here. I think the Stephen Miller types imagine us being more like Europe than we are. And they create in their minds that there's an assimilation problem or there's a cultural degradation problem. But I just don't see that in real life.
Okay, okay. Seema says, thanks, Jonathan. And then, okay, let me take SK's question. SK says, when can we expect proper info from USCIS, DHL, WH from regarding this to avoid all queries?
That's that's wishful thinking. From what I can tell right now, all of the interpretation and all the guidance is being done at the political level. So in the federal executive agencies, you've got the political level, which are people who really aren't subject matter experts, but they're just trying to like move policy in a certain direction. And then you have the worker bees, the full-time staff that are the professionals that know what they're doing. The lack of clarity and all the current interpretations tell me that the politicals are drafting this because it's so sloppily done and so imprecise and not using terms of art the way that they need to be used. We're not going to get clarity until they delegate this down to the worker bee level and have people that actually know what they're talking about drafting these policies and in these interpretations. And that will take some time. How long it'll take, nobody knows for sure.
Okay. Well, SK, I hope you have got your answer. Well, like John says, nobody knows. So we'll just have to wait and wait for the right time. And if it gets out, we will be the first one to tell you. So you stay tuned with Immigration Talk Show and make sure to subscribe to the channel too. So let me take Nirav Solanki's question also. He says, if the government's logic is to discourage H-1B filings, what's the bigger picture here? Are they pushing for more domestic hiring or simply making it impossible for Indian talent to enter?
I think they suffer under the delusion that if they keep foreign workers out, that American kids will be getting these jobs. But what they're not taking into account is the quality gap between a lot of these American students, or the skill gap between the American students and the foreign talent that's getting hired. So, if you're a US company and you need the skills and you can get the skills by offshoring, you're going to do that. You're not going to, offer the job in the same pay or more pay rather to an American kid that's not as qualified. So, you know, I don't I don't quite understand. I don't see a rational motivation for what they're doing because I think it's bad for the economy. I think it's bad for the country, and I think it's especially bad for the tech industry.
Yeah, absolutely. Because most of them are, the immigrants, right, working in all these companies. So if they want all of them to go, so it definitely is going to impact the economy.
Yeah. Well, my friend Stuart Anderson, he writes for Forbes. He was looking at analysis and just said that there was 1.4% of the U.S. or immigrants right now, or high skilled immigrants, and they're accounting for over 9%, I think it is, of startup companies, and the new economic mobility from startup companies. And so they're definitely over hitting above their weight, as we would say. They're punching harder than they should, and they're doing a lot more economically than you would expect. And so we're going to be losing out on that type of economic activity if we keep foreign workers out.
Right, right. Okay, absolutely. Let me also take Shrey's question. He says, has there any lawsuits filed yet against this proclamation? What will be the legal questions if someone wants to file so?
So no lawsuits as yet. It's still pretty new. So the way these things work is a new policy comes out, and there's typically going to be what's called a motion for preliminary injunction, an emergency case asking the courts for immediate action. The government very quickly after announcing this proclamation rolled back through policy interpretations the impact of the proclamation, which took it off of the emergency docket footing. And so it's no longer a case that really can justify being filed as a preliminary injunction, and it's going to have to go the normal, more lengthy process of litigation. So the issues that are going to be in play here are, does the president have the authority to, create a new fee entirely with the stroke of a pen? And that fee, by the way, has the effect of eliminating one visa category from the Immigration and Nationality Act, or largely removing it. So I don't think he has that ability. If you look at the way fees are structured under the Immigration and Nationality Act, when fees are authorized, they're always tied to a function, and you're supposed to recoup the cost of performing that function through fees. And this $100,000 thing, they're not really doing anything. They're just cashing a check. And that's the only work that's involved in processing this. So I think it's hard for them to justify that. The other, odd issue is this is done under what's called INA 212F. And then what they've done is they've exerted a national security rationale for why they're keeping certain H-1Bs out. Anytime this has been done before under 212F, it's been the entire visa category, not picking and choosing, just the entire visa category or entire countries. So here what they're essentially saying is you're a national security threat if you're working for a small or medium company. You're not a national security threat if you're working for a major tech company with a high market cap value. So it's hard for them to justify why that's not arbitrary and capricious and why that should stand. And the final question, that jumps to my mind is, can the president just avoid the Administrative Procedure Act and create new rules with the stroke of a pen through a proclamation? Because if he has that authority, there will never be the regulatory process as we know it. The regulatory agencies won't bother proposing rules, taking comments, analyzing comments from the public, and then publishing a final rule. They'll just draft it up for the president's signature, have the president sign it as a proclamation, and the Administrative Procedure Act will be a dead letter. It will be meaningless for all intents and purposes. So, as I see it, the battleground is going to be over those three different areas. And I don't think the government has great arguments for any of those.
Right. And the CEOs of all these major tech companies are immigrants. So what are you going to do about that, right?
Yeah, it is kind of funny to look at the CEO roster for these companies. But, as CEOs and executives, their interest is to the company and doing what they think is the best for the company. And if that is having a monopoly on all the talent that's coming into the country, then, that's what they're going to do. What that doesn't take into account is that if you look at economic activity in the United States, the vast majority of economic activity and the driver of social progression and wealth in this country has historically been the small companies and the medium-sized companies. And if you're going to start blocking them out of economic opportunity, it's going to have a huge impact and a negative impact on the U.S. economy.
Absolutely, absolutely. John, and somebody has also posted this on Reddit. They want to know that if my employer refuses to pay this new fee, can they legally make me pay it from my salary?
No. So, if you're outside of the country coming into the country and they refuse to pay the fee, you're not getting into the country. And in my perspective, it would make no sense whatsoever to pay $100,000 out of your pocket just for the opportunity to work, because there's no guarantee that you won't get laid off, shortly after paying that fee. It would just be insanity for somebody to pay this fee themselves and not have the company fill up the bill. So, the reality is if they don't pay it, you're not getting into the US, but I wouldn't pay it personally.
Okay. Okay. So Ricky also wants to know what changes are expected in the EB to NIW and EB-1 rules slash criteria. As I heard, those are also under investigation.
Well, we'll have to see what they come out with when they issue proposed rules. It's anybody's guess at this point.
Okay. And is there any clarity now on which areas can be waived for the 100K fee under national interest? Will having NIW I-140 approved qualify?
So, my guess is no. Subsection C of the proclamation is the one that deals with the waiver process. And it is not very well fleshed out or clarified as to how waivers will be processed and who's eligible. I have a cynical guess of what's going to happen, and it's going to be that the major tech companies won't have to pay it, but everybody else will. And that would be my only guess of what's going to happen with the waiver fee or the waiver process.
Okay. And SK says still USCIS petition is pending, and mostly it seems all consular processing petitions and are in pending states till October 1st is effective date to start. Is there any reason for this year delay?
That was a really long question. Can you read that
Okay,
again?
so he says still USCIS petition is pending, and mostly it seems all consular processing petitions are in pending state still. October 1st is effective date to start. Is there any reason for this year delay?
Other than everything in the immigration system is getting additional scrutiny, I would say that's the biggest problem. Is they're looking into everything. Your social media, and the State Department is spending a lot of time looking into people's social media. They're looking into the employer, double checking the work that USCIS has already done, and verifying certain details about the petition and the employer. So everything will take longer in this current environment.
Okay, okay. And okay, and he also says that if petition approved date is January 2026, will visa validity and work authorization starts counting 3 years from October 1st, 2025 or Jan 1st, 2026?
So it's the validity date of the petition. So you have a validity date that's stamped on there. That's what you're limited by. As you approach the end of that validity date, you need to get an extension or leave the country.
Okay. SK, I hope you have got all your answers. If you have more questions coming, please keep them posting in the comment section. John is here for another 10 minutes. Not just SK, but all of you guys. I see a lot of people joined us in the live session today. So if you have any questions for John, please keep them posting in the comment section. John is here for another 10 minutes. We'll be more than happy to take them all. And meanwhile, let me take Shrey Garg's question. He says, I heard that 100K fees can be waived in national interest. Is there any guidance in that yet? Can H-1B non-cap be part of that waiver?
As we just talked about a few minutes ago, there's no guidance on that yet. And subsection C, which creates the availability of a waiver, has not been very thoroughly explained, and it's anybody's guess as to who will qualify for that.
Okay. Is there any way to gain visibility on what's happening on the lawsuit front in real time and who are the plaintiffs?
So there's no lawsuits that have been filed
Right.
as yet. I think there's a lot of groups that are evaluating it. I know that we're talking with people who are wanting to challenge this in court. Once the first case is filed, I imagine there will be a lot of press activity about that, and it'll probably be covered in a variety of different lawsuits.
Right, and also it will.
In newspapers.
It is also going to cover. It is also going to be covered in Immigration Talk Show. We'll be live with John talking about that case. So don't worry, we'll be the first one to update you about it if any of that sort happens. Okay, so John, coming back to our questions. What happens to green card sponsorship plans if companies are squeezed by this fee?
Say that again.
So I asked that what happens to green card sponsorship plans if companies are squeezed by this fee?
Yeah, it's up to the individual company. I don't think this fee has any direct relationship to green card processing. Um, yeah, so it'll just be up to companies to evaluate whether or not they're going to file green cards.
Okay. Also, are Canadians and other countries going to benefit from Indian tech talent, avoiding the US?
Well, if you look at what the UK did the other day, they just removed all
Mm.
fees for high skilled talent coming into the UK to work. So I think they're looking to definitely take advantage of our, you know, wounding of ourselves and our self-created limitations on who we can have working in the U.S. Uh, we used to be the biggest draw in the world, and now we are successfully killing that once valuable position that we had. So I think the other countries in the world are definitely looking to take advantage of our screw ups here.
Definitely, because Canada said that they are soon going to do something about this, and China has already, invited people to apply for K visas. So I'm sure you must have
Yeah,
heard of that news, right?
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's especially when we're in a new economic reality of the AI boom, limiting the people that will, fuel that boom is just absolute insanity.
Right. Okay. Also, John, because we were talking about this case. So, can such a high fee even survive a legal challenge in U.S. courts?
I don't think so. I don't think so at all. I think, you know, the law requires that fees that the immigration agencies charge be related to the cost of the government providing a service. And here, the only service the government is providing is cashing a check. I just don't see the relationship between $100,000 and that function of cashing the check being something that is going to be proportional and something that's going to be allowable.
Mm, okay. And does U.S. law allow the government to raise fees this sharply without Congress?
So, two different issues. There's the question of raising fees that Congress has already authorized. Congress has authorized certain fees, and they've allowed the agencies the ability to raise those fees by going through a certain process. And that process is governed by something called the Administrative Procedure Act. They have to do some research, come up with a proposed rule, allow people in the economy and in the country to comment on the proposed rule. Then they have to review those rules, comments, and then they have to create a final rule. And then the final rule is what governs, and then that final rule can be challenged in court. This is altogether different in that Congress hasn't authorized this fee and hasn't created this fee. And it's being done in the stroke of a pen without following the Administrative Procedure Act. So that combination, I think, will ultimately be fatal to the government's position. I don't think courts are going to allow the executive branch to just completely bypass Congress and bypass the Administrative Procedure Act entirely and effectively make new law with the stroke of a pen. I just don't see that happening.
Okay. Okay. And now I would like to ask you this very important question. I mean, all of them are very important, but this is, I'm sure everybody wants to know about this, that what is the smartest way for Indian tech workers to now prepare?
Well, if you're in the US, don't leave until this is resolved, especially if you need
Mm,
stamping. I would say let the courts determine whether or not this is legal and whether this is going to fly. And then after that plays out, make your decisions on what to do next.
what if they've already left and they didn't know about this? What should they?
If they've left and they need stamping, and in order to get stamping in order to return to the US, then I would say outside the US until the courts have their way with this issue. If your employer is not going to pay the fee, then I would say sit tight and work remotely until you can come back into the US.
Mm. And what do you think? How long is it going to take until this is resolved?
So realistically, it could take 8 months once the case is initiated. Then there will be appeals. Most certainly, there will go through the appellate process. That will probably take 4 to 5 months. So I think we're looking at a total of about a year from start to finish in something like this before it's decided.
Okay. 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 Suman Sharma is here, and Suman says, I was working on a company which filed my H-1B, got approved, and in between, company B acquired my company A with change in location, and H-1B amend is filed in July and pending app. Can I visit for stamping?
So if you go for stamping, from that question, I'm assuming that they're already in the U.S. Again, if they leave the country and they require stamping in order to return to the country, then they're going to have to pay the $100,000 fee as of now.
Okay. Okay. Okay, Suman, thank you for your question. If you have a follow-up, please, you can, post it in the comment section. Harsh Chaudhary is also here. Harsh says, present international students are in the range of this or not?
The F1s are not impacted by this.
Okay. 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 John, also, will the new rule make it more difficult for recent graduates to secure H-1B sponsorship now?
Only if they need a consular process. So, if you're just doing a change of status, you're not required to pay the fee. So if you have to go to the consulate for a visa stamp, then it's definitely going to have an impact on you.
Okay. And one other viewer says, if my employer withdraws sponsorship, do I have any legal remedies?
Nope. If the employer withdraws sponsorship, especially if you're not in the US, there's absolutely no legal remedies there for you. If your employer, terminates you, then while you're in the US, there's really not much you can do there either. Now, where that's different is if, there's issues of back pay, if the employer hasn't been paying as they've been required to under the petition and the LCA, you have legal recourse against the employer for the back pay. But that's really all you've got.
Okay. Okay. And okay, Suman says, I'm currently in F1 STEM OPT. If you remember, she asked this question about, I was working on a company A, and she said, can I visit for stamping? And you said she will have to pay. So she's saying she's currently on F1 STEM OPT. So does she still have to pay?
If she changes status and stays in the US, no. If she leaves the country, then yes.
Okay. Okay. All right, Suman. So that's the simple answer. Okay, thank you so much, John. John, any last advice for the viewers watching us and who are still, trying to understand what should they do and what should they not do? I mean, you already have said that don't travel, stay in the country, but anything apart from that, any best advice that you have for, all these viewers?
So the one thing I would say is that, the government can screw up your life in the blink of an eye, but it's going to take you a long time to fix it. And when we're in this situation that we're in right now, I get that it's frustrating. I get that you want change now, today, but that's just not the way the system works. So you just have to prepare yourself that this is going to take some time to get resolved. And it's not fair, it's not right, but that's just the way it is. And so just prepare yourself. If you're outside the US right now, start making plans for working remotely until this is resolved and you can come back into the US.
Keep patience, give it some time. Hopefully it's going to be resolved. And yes, like John said, it is unfair. Well, nobody says that, things are going to be smooth. Life is unfair. So, don't take too much stress. Just have some patience until things gets resolved. And if you want to get in touch with John, you can connect him by clicking on this link. This is bit.ly/Wasden Law. So make sure that you get in touch with John by clicking on this link, and you can also visit his website, wasden.law, if you want to get in touch with him. And yes, thank you so much, John, for being here on a Sunday. And that was a great session, a very insightful one, and hoping to see you very, very soon with another exciting topic.
Thank you. It's good to be with you.
Thank you so much. All right. So thank you so much to our viewers too for tuning in on a Sunday, and I hope you enjoyed the session like I did. And I am going to see you all very soon with another very insightful episode and another very insightful topic. But until then, I'll have to take your leave. So you guys keep watching, keep sharing this video, keep liking this video, and also make sure you subscribe to Immigration Talk Show. I'm Rajni Bharara, host. Leaving for now, but I'll see you all very soon. Subscribe, Immigration Talk Show. Take care